We did. I always wear
Go ahead. Yeah. What color you like to wear? I was saying we all are wearing gray right now while we let this chat breathe for
yeah.
just a
No,
second.
I usually wear a polo shirt, so I've decided to change it
Ah.
up a little.
Dressing in the grays. It will look good, man. Look good. I love the stash. We're still rocking that.
Yeah,
And we are rolling. It's a Wednesday night here in Denver because the weather seems to come in every Wednesday night. We've talked about this. I don't know what it is snow, cold, whatever. But Wednesday nights, that's the time it's going down. Speaking of going down, it's going down right now. What's up, Broncos country? It is MHI with Thomas Hall, Luke Patterson, and Scott Kennedy. We are excited to talk to you. We have a ton to cover. I don't know if you know, Tom, but the Broncos are at the combine.
yeah, it's nice. I was
Actually,
worried.
yeah, right. I'm not sure if Sean Payton and George Payton were going to make that trip. They
That's
definitely
right.
made the trip. There's a lot coming out of yesterday's press conference with George Payton and Sean Payton. They had a lot to say. We're going to talk about the scouting combine. Don't worry, Broncos country, you haven't missed anything just yet. Monday and Tuesday have been a lot of interviews, medicals, things of that nature. So, getting some of the business done behind the scenes, if you will. And we will definitely get into that. But before we do, let's say hello to folks in the chat. Mike S. was the number one guy in here today saying, "What's up, Luke, Thomas, Scott, Dylan, and Broncos country? What is up, Mike? I see
Hello.
your Bama players are represented very well at the combine like they usually are, Tom."
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah, they get plenty of invites from the big schools, that's for sure. But it's been kind of strange. There's not as much fanfare about the combine this year for some reason. I'm not seeing it yet. I don't know why. Usually, it seems a lot more boisterous on social media about it. But it's been, I don't know. It seems quiet to me this year. Maybe it's just Twitter is not as good
Yeah,
anymore.
I hear you. I think it's the same thing. I get those tones too, a little underwhelming, and I think action's going to pick up when on the field stuff starts,
Sure.
right? So when you're looking at the combine schedule, obviously we're all waiting for the big boys, the defensive line and the linebackers to mix it up first. That's going to happen tomorrow, Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll get into the Friday, Saturday, Sunday schedule. If you want to watch the NFL scouting combine, folks, you can do that on NFL Network where it's live streaming. And I'm also seeing it's live streaming on Fubo TV. Not sure what Fubo TV is, but if it's live streaming the NFL combine, you should probably check that out if you want to check out some of that coverage. Michael Ronquillo, speaking of checking out coverage, he has always got our back, and he's looking good in that new Buckham orange shirt. Good evening, Luke and Thomas Hall and the Mile High Insiders. Go Broncos and Buckham. I got my orange shirt. I should have wore it for this show, Michael. Next week, I'll definitely have it on. I need to wash that bad boy first. But Tom, we're getting you some MHI gear
Yep.
also. I got a hat and a
Coming.
shirt. Should be en route. But guys, be sure to head on over to @Mile High Huddle. Check out all our gear. Right, we have got so many podcasts, so many exciting things going on right now. Grab yourself a hat, a shirt, a mug. Mugs make a really, really good gift as well. I know I love coffee mugs. I can't ever have enough of them, and they're really good with Broncos for breakfast also. So be sure to get yourself a Broncos for breakfast mug where you can listen to Nick Kendall and Scott Kennedy. Here we go, Tom. We're off and running. And general thoughts on the scouting combine? I know sometimes I like to refer to it just like everyone else as the underwear Olympics.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a bunch to do about nothing. Other times, this is where deals get done for
Yeah.
free agency that's going to open Wednesday, March 15th. The franchise tag deadline is on Tuesday, March 7th. What are your initial impressions of just the NFL scouting combine in general?
I always love the combine. I mean, I know that there's a underwear Olympics connotation, but man, watching these these guys, I mean, some of the big guys just with the athleticism, it's amazing, So I always kind of get pumped up for the combine, and I know, it's not. I don't like to jump onto the workout warrior types, and then throw away all the stuff that I've heard or saw or watched about them in film and whatnot. But man, some of these players, they can really make or break their move up or down in the draft at the combine, because if they can show that they're athletic along with the tape, it just moves them right up. So it's exciting. It's fun to watch. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. And what I really like is the highlights going back from previous years, right? Watching Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen run their 40, watching some former Broncos and just how young they really looked. I mean, these guys, I hate to use the term babies, but they were baby Broncos at the time. When you look at like a Justin Simmons, even
Sure.
Pastor Tan, 2 years removed into his career right now, he physically looks more mature as well.
Sure.
Cortland Sutton, there's some other videos going out there of him right now. It's cool to kind of take a step back and look at some former Bronco, or not former Broncos, but current Broncos and how they got there. Sue
Sure.
Gibson here on MHI tonight saying she heard Sean Payton is already working with Russell Wilson. Sean Payton talked about this a little bit yesterday in his press conference. They definitely had dinner during the Super Bowl week with Joe Montana. He's been in contact with Russell Wilson, I think via cell phone, Skype, what have you. But it's a busy week for the Broncos contingent. Speaking of the brass and the coaching staff, which is now complete, by the way, Tom.
Yeah, finally. I
Finally
tell you,
have a
I'm not
yeah.
patient, and I was waiting for that to be done for a long time.
Yeah, well, and speaking of waiting, you don't have to wait anymore to look on Twitter, Instagram, whatever your social media is, to look at Russell Wilson. And homeboy looks like he's getting in shape. I expect him to come into training camp lean, mean, and a fighting machine, if you will, for Sean Payton. But I'm not going to overreact. I don't have Instagram, so I'm just seeing these pictures kind of
Yeah,
float around on Twitter, and Twitter's
sure.
horrible enough, which is why I don't have Instagram. But I don't know, man. I like it. I like to see a lean and trim Russell Wilson because that's ultimately when he's playing his best.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, bringing back some of that old magic, a little bit of a little more wiggle, so to speak, get a little bit more movement out of him. And, if that's what works, if that's what it's going to take, then, man, he needs to do it.
Needs to do it. Gary Palmer is always doing it, giving us that support and that love. We give it right back. Thank you, Gary. Good to see you. GLP, generous 4.99 super. Hi, Luke, Thomas, and Scott. Like those clips, Scott. MHH for life. Hashtag Buckham. Hashtag Go Broncos. It's a team effort here at MHH where we've got a lot of exciting action, as Gary Leeds Palmer knows. Yours truly has an article up right now on Dalton Reisner that we're going to talk about a little bit here. The offensive line. George Payton had some very revealing comments, or lack thereof, when talking about the offensive line and Dalton Reisner in general. We're going to get to that in the show. Tom, I know you're gritting to get after Draymond Jones and what that potential contract could look like.
Sure.
And how are the two related? Listen, Broncos country, I know that we've got the richest owner in professional sports, but you've got something called the cap, and that cap matters when you're getting these contracts together. Sometimes it's literally having to pick one position over the other, and the Broncos are going to definitely find themselves in that hole. Draymond Jones versus Dalton Reisner. Which player do they want to commit to? Which player is able to bend? That's going to be the really interesting thing coming up here in just a week.
Well, and the other thing that happens too, if you don't re-sign someone like Draymond Jones, you got to replace him somehow, and you either replace him with a lesser talent, or you try to go to the draft. I mean, if you don't want to pay him the money, you're gonna have to go the other way. You're gonna have to try and find something in the draft, or you're gonna pay a lesser talent to come in with free agency. So you're making yourself another hole. And the thing is you drafted this player, you've cultivated him, you're waiting for him to become a player that you envisioned when you drafted him, and he's been pretty dang good. So it's kind of strange that they're just, almost washing their hands of him already, it seems. And that's a bit of a head scratcher to me, especially when I saw the tweet that came out that he's looking for 60 to 70 million. If that's all he's looking for, put it in a 5-year deal and get him for cheap on on the annual average,
Front load it. Yeah,
Yeah.
front load it. You've got guys and gals in the numbers department. I consider you and Bob like our numbers guys out here at MHH. Like I was able to just spit off like off the cuff. I'm asking Tom, hey man, what's the cap look like right before the show? Or hey, what's Draymond's numbers looking like? And you guys are able to spit them out like that. Be sure to follow at Thomas Hall NFL on Twitter. Yours truly at Luke Patterson LP and at Scout Kennedy. Scott on the ones and twos for us, always throwing some support. Kevin Gray showing some love to MHI. Thought it was Tuesday. What's up, Luke and Scott and Thomas? Yeah, I hear you, Kevin. The days kind of all blend together here, but we've got some exciting action at the Combine. It's starting tomorrow. with deep or linebackers and defensive linemen rather, mixing it up on Thursday. Friday, you've got DBs and special teams. Saturday, quarterbacks, wide receiver, and tight end. And Sunday, offensive line and running backs. My guy, Phil McLaughlin. What's up, Phil? Good evening, Luke Thomas and Deacon Scott. What do you guys think of these guys for our offensive line? Mike McGlinchey, Brandon Parker, or Andrew Wiley? Hashtag go Broncos, hashtag buck 'em.
Yeah, well, I mean, McGlinchey's been thrown around a lot. His name has come up quite often. I actually like him. I think he's my number 2 offensive tackle to go after in free agency, with the first one being Juwan Taylor, just because of his youth. And I think he's coming more, he's going to be coming into his prime, going to be hitting that prime for longer in that contract than McGlinchey. But I would take both of them. I wrote about this a while back. The right tackle position has to be fixed, and they've been looking for a fix since they moved Orlando Franklin to the guard position. That's how long it's been since the Broncos have solved the right tackle position, and they've got a lot of mistakes in there in that time. So they need to get it right, and I think they should go after a free agent. Spend the money on it to get one, and not someone like Juwan James, someone who has potential, who's willing to put in the work to become a good right tackle in their prime.
Jesse Hilborn, not a fan, saying, I really hope we don't throw away the money on Mike McGlinchey, Taylor, or McGarry. Look, we've got to figure out this offensive line position, folks, and that's something that George Paton addressed in his press conference yesterday. He was specifically asked at the Indianapolis NFL Scouting Combine if he expects tackle Garrett Bowles to be healthy. And George Paton's answer to that, quote, we need to upgrade at the offensive line. We do expect Garrett to be healthy. There's a lot of different ways to acquire any position, free agency or the draft. It just kind of depends on what's stronger. Is free agency stronger or the draft stronger? Obviously, we need to upgrade there on the offensive line. And George Paton saying twice in a very small clip, we need to upgrade on the offensive line. I didn't hear necessarily a ringing endorsement of Garrett Bowles. Now, I'm not just putting my tinfoil hat on. No, I'm not saying Garrett Bowles is being shopped like other masseuses or anything like that. But it's one of these things where George Paton knows he's got to fix this front 5 unit. And how is he going to do it? That's the biggest question right now. They're in Indy. They're interviewing prospects. I'm sure meeting with offensive linemen here, if not already. You got to make some decisions. When I'm on the road, just like Scott, right? Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, these sort of things. Other teams are asking, hey, man, we're here, and you could have 4 to 5 new starters on that offensive line. Lloyd Cushenberry, the jury's out. Dalton Reisner, unrestricted free agent. We're going to get to him in just a little bit. Quinn Miners, still got to see something there, bud. And then that right tackle position, you can't get away from it. It's like a nightmare for the Denver Broncos. They've got a quarterback. I'm glad we don't have to talk about Carson Wentz getting signed to Denver or Derek Carr or any of these sort of quarterback issues right now. But it starts with the front 5. And as the offensive line goes, the rest of the team goes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see them trying to get rid of Garrett Bowles, because who are they going to put in there, right? They can't revamp the entire front 5, so to speak, in one offseason. So I think they have Garrett Bowles in their plans, unless somebody comes in with a crazy offer, then okay, sure. But, you've got 3 other spots that you have to take care of. You've got guard, you've got center, and you've got right tackle. And there's a few ways that you can go about doing it. I mean, you can't really do it in the draft because you don't have many draft picks and they're all late. You can't take a risk on just saying, oh, well, we'll take care of the offensive line in the draft. You might get one decent one that's for the future, or maybe one that can be a good starter as a rookie, but you're not going to get 3 in the draft. So you're going to have to spend money in free agency. You have to.
Spending money. Michael Ronquillo's got some figures for us. 4 years, $60 million is my deal for Draymond Jones. What are your thoughts?
Taking a heartbeat. I would do that every day of the week. 4 years for $60 million. Yeah. Hell yeah.
And there are reports on your Twitter right now. I think you were retweeting, and Thomas has been working these numbers all day, folks. Head on over to Thomas Hall NFL on Twitter. I think there was a report out there saying that Draymond Jones was commanding at least $70 million.
60 to 70. Yeah.
60 to 70. Okay. So that's probably on the lower end, Mike, and I'm okay with it, right? Because you've got more business that you've got to conduct. Tom, do you think there's an offer on the table right now from the Broncos to Draymond Jones?
Well, from the way that everybody's talking about it, it seems like they tried to offer him something and he just turned it down. He wants to test free agency. He thinks he's going to get big money. So they probably kind of felt it out to see what he was going to take, but his number is probably way too high. They're probably way too far apart. So I would say that they've at least inquired about it and they've realized that he wants to see what he can command on the open market. And, I think he can command quite a bit. He looks like he's ready to, he's looked like he's ready to break out for a long time, but he really does now. Like Draymond Jones is hitting his prime. He's a really good interior pass rusher. Not great, not elite yet. I think he was going to really have some numbers in 2022 that made him look more elite than he was, but he missed the last 4 games. So you don't see all the numbers there. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to command a fairly sizable contract out there.
So George Paton was asked directly at the scouting combine about what contract conversations have felt like with Draymond Jones. And George Paton's answer, quote, very positive. I've spoken with his agent, Kyle McCarthy from Athletes First. I've had a number of conversations with Draymond. Draymond Jones is a very good player. He's one of our core players on defense. Conversations have been very positive. So conversations have been positive. I think there's a tone out there from the Broncos that they really don't want to use that franchise tag. Again, the franchise tag deadline is coming up Tuesday, March 7th, folks.
Yeah.
I don't know where the time has gone, Tom. It's starting to speed up, man. We're in March 1st today. You've got March 7th, the date for the franchise tag deadline. And then just a week from that, Wednesday, March 15th, on this show, Wednesday, MHI, NFL free agency opens Wednesday, nice. March 15th. So we're going to be able to chalk up some of the first early doings of free agency. Sometimes you get some big fish on the first day. Other times they wait a little bit, but we're going to definitely get some more answers as time gets closer. Again, the NFL scouting combine is where deals get done, whether that be a trade in the draft or free agency. I think it's an unofficial period, really. I mean, tampering, what is that? The NFL doesn't know what that is. The tampering happens all the time. I've seen it with my own eyes. It is what it is, and this is where deals get done. But one thing that I wanted to write about on Mile High Huddle that was stuck out like a sore thumb to me was George Paton's comments about impending free agents or lack thereof. George Paton talked about Draymond Jones. He talked about Garrett Bowles. We got into both of those already. He was even asked about Jerry Jeudy and that 5th-year option. Said that was something that he wanted to look at in May. Said, quote, we're really happy with where Jerry's at. So you got to believe that 5th-year option is probably going to be exercised on Jerry Jeudy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
mean,
think
why
so.
not? Why not?
Yeah.
Unless you're shopping him quietly and some team really or calls you saying we need number 10 now. Yeah. And that could happen. I mean, crazier things have happened, but I think obviously Jerry Jeudy's going to get that 5th-year option. George Paton was asked about Alex Singleton, was using quotes, calling him a baller, a leader, saying we'd love to have Alex back. And then he talked about some of the former or not former, but current Broncos that are rehabbing from injury. We talked about Garrett Bowles. Tim Patrick, he said, is doing very well. Javonte Williams, Randy Gregory. These are all players that the Broncos have to have back. The one name George Paton wasn't asked about and didn't talk about, Dalton Risner, left guard. That just stuck out to me, not because Dalton Risner's a world beater offensive lineman like we were talking about before the show with Scott, but because you're talking about trying to drastically improve an offensive line unit, possibly without this 4-year starter. I mean, Dalton Risner's not even on the radar. For me, it doesn't feel like he's on George Paton's radar, Sean Payton's radar at all. I wrote about it at milehighhuddle.com. What do you think? I mean, was George Paton intentionally leaving Dalton Risner out because he sees Dalton Risner playing on another team?
Yeah, I mean, it seems that way. I mean, I think if he had that blow up on the sidelines during the year and was a much better player, I think people would have. But that blow up on the sidelines kind of maybe made people think a little bit differently about Risner. I don't know. I like the guy. Seems like a good guy. Seems like a pretty good player, but he's not a great player. He's somebody that you let walk, right? He doesn't look like he's improved since his rookie season that much. His projection doesn't look like he's going to be an all-star player, to me. So those are the players you let walk. You don't let the players walk that you think are going to grow into one of those more elite type players. And I think that's the difference between Reisner and Draymond Jones. I think Draymond Jones' projection is he's going to be playing himself into that more, top 10 role. Reisner won't. That's why I think they're going to let him test the market and probably find someone to fill in behind him.
Draymond wants to get paid for what he's going to do. Perhaps Dalton Reisner wants to get paid for what he's already done. I mean, you look at Dalton Reisner as a 4-year starter for the Denver Broncos. He was immediately tasked. And I don't know, Travis asking the question, does this sound like the end for Reisner? I'm starting to feel like it is, bud. I don't know. I'm not going to say per source or any of that, but it's starting to feel that way, bud. I think number 66 could be out of here, and I love that Broncos hat, Trav. Hopefully you and your family are doing well, brother. Thanks for tuning in to MHI. Look, man, Dalton Reisner has done a lot of good for the Denver Broncos, for the communities, the Walter Payton Man of the Year. But for crying out loud, you can't be shoving backup quarterbacks and getting into fights on Christmas in front of the world. I mean, maybe that rubbed Greg Penner the wrong way. Maybe that rubbed George Payton the wrong way. Remember, John Elway was the one that picked Dalton Reisner. I was thrilled. He was a player that I identified very early in the draft, a versatile player that could play multiple positions in college. And we haven't really seen that here in the NFL. But Dalton Reisner was tasked his rookie year with helping Garrett Bowles. Dare I say fixing Garrett Bowles? And Dalton Reisner, make no mistake about it, is very much a part of that big contract that Garrett Bowles was rewarded, in my opinion. He came in and immediately made Garrett a more confident player, a more accountable player, and allowed Garrett to be comfortable in his own skin. Transition to Dalton's second year. What's he asked to do? Call out plays for the rookie center and Lloyd Cushenberry and Drew Lock, a quarterback who I wanted here in the first place, but a guy that couldn't even, identify pre-snap coverage. Dalton Reisner's been asked to do a lot of things. But you're right, Tom. Has he performed at that elite level? Definitely not. But do you need an elite level left guard? I mean, don't get me wrong. I want Quentin Nelson. I wanted him then. I'd love him now. But do you need an elite left guard?
No, absolutely not. And the thing, you don't need an elite left guard. You need a good left guard. You need some elite players on your offensive line, but you need them to work together well, right? That's the thing. And it's interesting. I tweeted at Mark Schlereth a while back, and I asked him, what are the 3 things that they have to do to fix this line? And first thing he said was better players, right? Better players. And they need to get better players. And so you're going to have to get rid of players that are on that line. And Risner's one of them. You're not going to pay him elite money to keep him around if he's not elite.
Risner. You're calling him Risner. I don't know if you're taking shots at him on purpose, Tom, or what.
Reisner,
if you are,
sorry.
I absolutely love it, and I'm here for it. But Risner, I got to start calling him Risner.
No. Slip of the tongue.
Look, man, 27 years old, from Wiggins. He's a Colorado story. You know him, you love him. But let's take some of that bias away, Broncos country, and really start to look at it. Do you want to pay between 10 and 17 million to lock down Dalton Reisner at left guard if it means costing you Draymond Jones? That's the decision that the Broncos have to make right now. And look, when George Payton's out there talking about increasing or improving the offensive line and their performance, I appreciate it. I respect it. He's honest. How are you going to do that, man, without a 4-year starter at left guard, specifically when you're losing Calvin Anderson, Cam Fleming, Billy Turner, and Tom Compton to free agency? I mean, look, Dalton Reisner is just one of 17 unrestricted free agents on this team that the Broncos have got to either reel back in or see what happens. Maybe I'll play devil's advocate here for George Payton. Maybe he's banking on Dalton Reisner coming back, saying, look, I would really love to stay in Colorado. My family's here. George Payton knows that. Everybody knows that. It's the worst kept secret in the world that Dalton Reisner has roots here in Broncos country. And maybe George Payton wants to use that to his advantage.
Well, and the thing that I gave Dalton Reisner a pass for a couple of years because when he first came in the league, he really fit that kind of West Coast zone blocking scheme offense. And I mean, I can't fault him too much because I think the zone blocking scheme was pretty much a mess in 2022, but he was supposed to be better in that scheme instead of a power scheme, right? But he really wasn't. So he never really recovered
Struggled.
that, whatever he had as a rookie, that projection, he never filled it. He never started to show that projection as a rookie. Even when he went back into the that scheme that helped him as a rookie. And Scott's coming in with, I'd offer him Dalton Risner $2.5 million. I doubt he'll take it, but
I had to throw that in there because I think that it's important you get an honest opinion from someone who's not being biased here. Now, Scott and you and I were all talking before the show, and he's like, look, when I come in using an outside perspective, looking at what this man's done, I don't see it. And I think that's a very fair argument, and it's almost the Philip Lindsay effect, right? Let's pretend Phil's not from Denver. How good is he really?
Yeah,
I'm still waiting. You know what I mean? And so it's tough because you love Dalton Risner, the man, but you need Dalton Risner, the left guard, to be a whole hell of a lot better. Maybe he will be better once he gets a second life, a second contract on another team. When you look at free agents, though, and you look at the NFL draft, man, it's not looking good, Tom. I mean, it's you got Mike McGlinchey, and are we sure he's playing? I'm not joking. I mean, are we sure he's going to come back for the 2023 season?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, he's a little long in the tooth.
Not too bad.
Caleb McGarry from the Falcons, Juwan Taylor, you talked about him from the Jags, Orlando Brown Jr., the Chiefs, Beacham for the Cardinals, I think. But it's going to be interesting, man. Decisions have got to be made. Phil McLaughlin making a very easy decision to show us some support and some love. We try to give that right back. Thank you, Phil. We really appreciate you for tuning in to MHI and always supporting us, bro. Hey, guys, how would you rank these guys as possible backup quarterbacks? Taylor Heineke, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, and Jacoby Brissett.
Wow. Yeah, thank you, Phil, for the support. Man, we really appreciate it here for sure. I'm going Heineke number one. I for some reason I've liked Heineke since he got his first start. He seems like a baller. He goes out there and plays above his real level, so to speak. And he kind of is growing on me. I think he's number one. And then after that, I mean, Winston has a ton of talent. He got injured and that's kind of set him back. But, he had started to have his best season under Sean Payton in New Orleans. Not as many interceptions. He was an interception machine that got reduced. So I'd take him second. And then, it's a toss up between Mariota and Brissett for me as a backup. But I'm taking Heineke.
I like it, Phil, and Zebulon too. Exactly that order. I'm gonna double down with Zebulon. Z, thanks for chiming in, buddy. Backup quarterback. Look, that's another conversation we need to start having. I mean, the Broncos should draft a quarterback. Will they? They only have 6 picks. Are they going to do some wheeling and dealing? George Payton loves to do that, right? It's his favorite thing in the world, other than talk about you can't have enough corners into a microphone. He loves to try to get capital. Don't be surprised if you see him move back. Don't be surprised if you see him move up. They don't have a ton to move up with, right? But maybe in those later rounds, we'll see some of those moves. I think George Payton is a cat that tries to learn from each draft. He's trying to get a good sense, especially while he's in Indianapolis right now. What do other teams want? That's something that we're not really talking about because we feel like the Broncos have so many positions of need that we need to identify. And the players that we do have that are decent, we need to make a decision if we're going to keep them or long-term commit. George Payton and Sean Payton are there in Indy trying to figure out what other teams are going to do too. You see coaches changing right now. As of today, I think I saw the Ravens linebacker coach moved over to Las Vegas to be the Raiders defensive line coach. So, I mean, you're seeing coaches start to change jobs out there in Indy too. It makes it very, very curious for what the Broncos are going to do.
Well, I'll tell you the thing, what I'm going to make a prediction here, but I'm not going to bet any money on or anything. If the Broncos can land your guy, the North Dakota State offensive lineman, Mack, and their first pick, they'll trade back they'll try to trade back with that second, third pick and gather more. I think they're targeting an offensive lineman there that can kind of step in early, and interior offensive lineman that can step in early and actually be a fairly solid starter that can grow into that role. And I think if they can hit that, someone like that, I think they'll wheel and deal a little bit and try and fall back so they can get some more picks.
I loved Cody Mock. A lot of people did down there at the Senior Bowl, and that's why his stock is definitely on the rise.
Yeah.
You're seeing some projections right now. Mock draft, right? Who cares unless you're a big fish? Second, third rounder, I think is where he's definitely getting himself, and he's getting himself into the late second round, early third. He probably started at 5 before he got to the Senior Bowl.
Right.
I mean, this is a cat that is super versatile. I mean, I'm talking about Dalton Risner and his versatility coming out of college. It's never been used with the Denver Broncos. I mean, that argument could be made too if you're Dalton Risner's agent. You've misused my guy the entire time. So when you start to look at these things, it's really interesting looking at it from the team's perspective, looking at it from the player's perspective, and then ultimately the analyst / fan and all of us, right? We got to try to figure out and interpret what these moves mean. Cody Mock definitely on the rise, North Dakota State. I love it. He's everything an offensive lineman should be. And then DeJuan Jones, another guy to look at, Ohio State. Baby Thanos is what they call this man. 6'8", 359 pounds. He did pull out at the Senior Bowl, I think, after the first day, Scott? I think the first day we were down there, and then he pulled out. That happens. So sometimes unexplainable. He set like the reach record. I remember talking to my guy Gavin about that. He's got some wings on him, right? But just because he's huge doesn't mean he can play football. So the Broncos have to do their due diligence. And man, if they targeted an offensive tackle with their very first pick, I think Broncos country would be pumped.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that if they do that, if they go invest either in free agency or they decide to go try and get a right tackle, I think they're going to have more options at guard and center, right? So with cheaper players. And I think you could get away with an offensive guard like Roger Saffold for a year while you're trying to pick up some draft offensive linemen to develop. Because, like, I do the analytics. I look at it. Age is coming to that age where offensive linemen tend to rebound and have one good season and then kind of go off into retirement, or, they bounce around teams or whatever. Someone like that can come in and fill it while you spend the money or you invest a lot more into that coveted right tackle position. And I'm going to tell you, the right tackle position is as important as the left tackle position in today's NFL, because a lot of the elite pass rushers line up on that side, and they've got to deal with it. They have to figure out that right tackle position.
You're exactly right. I love that you said that, because it's something that needs to be said. The right tackle position is becoming more and more a priority on teams' offensive lines. I mean, pass rushers flip-flop sides. I mean, some of the greats do. And then you're asking edge rushers who seem to hit more, or defensive ends and edge rushers seem to hit more often than offensive linemen. Something else to think about when it comes to splitting hairs between Dalton Risner and Draymond Jones. Are you really splitting hairs, or are we talking about, a wig and a whole new haircut when you look at offensive line and defensive end here? And something else with Draymond Jones, speaking of versatility with Dalton Risner, is that Draymond Jones was versatile too. Specifically last year when Bradley Chubb was traded. And I know the defense didn't play great at the end of the season, but going back and watching some of the film, I mean, the guy can line up inside, he can line up outside. You really, really like what he can bring to a defense. And I know that he's excited that Vance Joseph is back in Denver too. So it'll be interesting to see what the Broncos do. Again, they have got until Tuesday, March 7th to figure out the franchise tag. If they want to tag anybody, it's probably going to be Draymond Jones. Just a week later, Wednesday, March 15th, NFL free agency opens.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard's coming in with a super chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate the support always. And Richard says, only way to fix the line with our current draft capital and cap by not having two dudes two shoulders getting blown up every play, cough, left guard, center, cough.
Dalton, he must be, pronouncing it like you do. Dalton Risner. Risner and Cush getting pushed back in pass protection is something everyone's tired of. Richard, I see your point, man. I mean, look, Cush got in the weight room. How much good did that do him? I mean, really, a marginal improvement in his pass protection sets, and you're going to pass the ball to Russell Wilson. Sean Payton wants to run the ball a little bit more, I guess, than the average offensive guy. And you go back and you look at his systems and how he uses the running game. He wants to throw it. He's a former quarterback, folks. Okay. He wants to air it out. Russ is going to be airing it out. And yes, you'll see a healthier version of the run game, but don't expect to have all pro world beaters at running back. And Rich, I'm right there with you, man. We've got to figure out that interior offensive line, the whole offensive line. Who am I kidding? Need to figure out the whole offensive line. Garrett Bowles, everybody thinks that Garrett Bowles is just going to come back and play elite. He hasn't played elite in a long time since he earned that deal, in my opinion. And he's coming off of a leg injury. I mean, he's a little long in the tooth himself. He came into the draft as an older player.
Well, the thing that I think about is he's good enough for his contract right now. There's no reason to shop him. It's not a detrimental contract in my mind. If he comes back and plays, pretty well, then, like he has been the last couple of years. I mean, I know last year was kind of a mess and then he got injured, but his contract isn't such that it needs to be reworked or he needs to be traded. I mean, if you're going to want to get some capital, you look at, you get rid of Glasgow, you get rid of Darby, you get rid of Edmonds, and you got, yourself 30 some million there to work with. You don't need to do it. And it just makes another hole to fill when you already have 3 at least. So that's my problem.
No, I hear you, man. Another problem. Well, or lack thereof, Rodney Garcia. You guys think Mike Purcell is gone? Absolutely. For me,
Really?
100%. I do. I mean, why bring him back? What's the upside there? I mean,
he's not a free agent, so he's still under contract. Still got a light. He doesn't have a big contract left, I don't think. And I mean, you'd have to cut him. And why would you do that if you're not going to?
I'll tell you why. If you're
Draymond
gonna get after Dalton Reisner for shoving Brett Rippon, then I guess I can get after Mike Purcell for yelling at Russell Wilson, right?
Sure.
Even though we all loved it because it needed to happen. Still a bad look. They want to get that taste out of their mouths, and Sean Payton makes that so evident. And I love listening to Sean Payton on the mic, man, because he doesn't pull his punches. Maybe that's what we should start calling him. Sean pulls no punches Payton, because he's up there talking about, I didn't see anybody writing about Russell Wilson's office during week 1 or week 2. It was only until they started losing. The Broncos are trying to purge themselves of what happened last year, and Sean Payton's even referring to it as they. When talking about the Broncos last year, he's not putting himself there. He's definitely putting himself there today. He's the front man. He's the head coach. He's got his coaching staff together. One thing I thought was really, really interesting, and we'll get to you in just a second, John. I appreciate you weighing in. Vance Joseph was not George Payton or Sean Payton's first choice. That was so abundantly clear Tuesday when Sean Payton was talking about Vic Fangio and trying to twist Vic's arm and getting him back in Denver. I thought that was interesting. John, D-Generation X, appreciate you joining us, buddy. $5 super. If the Tennessee quarterback Hooker is there in the 3rd round, you should draft him. What do you think? A lot to make of this Tennessee cat. Now, maybe the Broncos are familiar with another Tennessee quarterback. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
maybe
the Broncos have got to figure it out with the quarterback position in the draft.
Yeah, I guess my only concern is he's coming off an injury and he's already 26. He'll be 27 to start the year. So by the time he's healed, he's already getting 28 years old. And then you got to develop him. And I don't know. It's a little worrisome on my side. But he's got he's a great talent. He showed what he could do at Tennessee last year. He could step in, but at that point, is that your fix for Russell Wilson at the end? When the contract gets to the point where you can cut him if he's not living up to it, it's possible. But then you got another thing to worry about: an old quarterback who's coming off an injury, hasn't played.
Well, and I don't think we know what type of quarterback Sean Payton wants.
Right.
I mean, Drew Brees, okay. Russell Wilson, okay. But he hasn't really drafted or developed a guy either when you think about it. So we're trying to figure out what kind of quarterback would Sean Payton want. And Taysom Hill, not a quarterback. Football player. Absolute football player. Say what you want about him. Not a quarterback. I think that contract probably still haunts the Saints just a tad.
Yeah, I don't know why they did that contract. I know they kept saying you could just keep massaging it as long as you want and it never really hurts them. But yeah, I don't get it. But yeah, you're right. Who has Sean Payton drafted? That
Joe
he
Klatt?
didn't really need to.
Well, Joe Klatt was undrafted, I think.
Yeah. He didn't need to. I mean, he had Drew Brees for his entire career almost, so he didn't have to really go out and draft one. But he never really drafted one as the next person up, so to speak, after Drew Brees hangs him up.
Funny
And
story about
they got themselves in some
in a
sticky
hole.
situation there, which is why I think he retired.
And man, yeah, right. He stepped away for a year, whatever the hell it
Yeah.
was. Funny story about Joel Klatt, right? One of the best to do his job, color commentary right now for college football, and we'll see if he ever dabs into the pros a little bit. But I had heard, now just a rumor, so who knows if it's actually true, but Joel Klatt coming out of CU, I think he was undrafted, and he loved New Orleans, absolutely loved Sean Payton, loved working with Drew Brees. Who wouldn't? And he started asking Drew, man, I love New Orleans. We're thinking about buying a house. Where do you recommend we move? And Drew Brees is just like, don't worry about it. And then Joel Klatt becomes this, mega star of college football and analyzing. And he's like Jim Harbaugh's Bay. And he was the one to call it, saying Jim's not leaving Michigan. I mean, and Joel Klatt hit the nail on the head, very, very plugged in. But I always think of that when quarterbacks, and I don't know why, but Joel Klatt and Drew Brees and Sean Payton, because Sean Payton is a savage. I mean, he's an absolute savage. I loved that he was taking shots at everybody in the media the other day and definitely showing some spice to him. That's who Sean Payton is. And come hell or high water, you can't say he didn't do things his way.
Yeah, no, it's true. And, he knows what he wants to do. He's got a plan and he's going to execute it. And he talks about executing the little things. And I think that, I think that you're going to see a different Broncos team. You're not going to see the amount of penalties that we saw last year. You're not going to see people blowing their assignments the way they did last year. It's going to be a better team fundamentally. We just have to hope that translates into wins on the field.
I feel like I know your answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. What are your thoughts on signing a running back in free agency? Because there's a lot out there right now. A lot of Broncos country want the premier guy, right? They want a Saquon Barkley. We're hearing rumblings. Maybe Kareem Hunt would be a decent fit. Obviously not Saquon Barkley level, but not going to be Saquon Barkley money either. Miles Sanders was connected, Philadelphia Eagles. What's your take on free agency with the running backs, or would you rather go to the draft?
Well, running backs, when they enter free agencies, are already on their decline. They're first they get that contract, they're already on their decline. And like I've said before, probably on this show, you pay players for what they're going to do in free agency, not what they've done. So for my money, you don't go after the Saquon Barkleys, you don't go after the Josh Jacobs. I mean, Josh Jacobs maybe a little bit more than Saquon Barkley because his injury history isn't as bad, but for my money, you go after the Montgomerys or those lower tier running backs that can be adequate. You don't pay the big money. You draft one because, like I said, they're already on their decline once they get that contract. The numbers show it. The history of running backs at 26 is their peak, and that's it. And then they start dropping off.
You're exactly right. I mean, it's like buying a brand new truck off the lot, right? And you're losing money as soon as you left the lot. That's the case with these running backs. And I would rather George Payton go to the draft or sign one undrafted, if we're going to be honest. There's a ton of them out there, folks. You can always find running backs. I get it's a devalued position and everything, but it's an important position too. Javonte Williams, man, that he shredded his knee. Okay, let's just be honest. He shredded it. And we're hearing reports, and you can read about it at milehighhuddle.com, that it's going to take him some time to get back. I mean, it took Saquon Barkley a couple years to get back after shredding his knee, and he already had some knee problems. So there are concerns, I can tell you right now, based on what I'm hearing around the league, because I'm not hearing anything from the Broncos. I would tell you if I was, but things are quiet over there. George Payton moves in silence, and anybody that says he doesn't is a liar, plain and simple. I think you can go to the running back position in the draft. I really liked Rashawn Johnson out of Texas at the Senior Bowl. He broke his hand the last day that I was there, so hopefully he's going to get back to feeling himself. Again, he kind of played second fiddle to Bijan down there at Texas, who's probably going to be the first running back drafted. And then Tavion Thomas out of Utah. I mean, this was a stud at the Shrine. I absolutely loved seeing him in Las Vegas. So I think you can definitely get a running back or two in the draft, unrestricted free agency, or excuse me, undrafted rather.
Yep.
the Broncos tend to do that, right? I feel like every year they get at least one or two running backs that we really kind of have to do our homework on, and then they pay them a bunch of money. I mean, wasn't it like Levante Bellamy, who was the highest paid running back a year or two ago out of that undrafted free agent class? Definitely a position to need.
I tell you what they should do. They should pay Mike Shanahan a little bit of money to consult with them on how to get a late running back, and whoever he says, you draft him late and you bring him in because he had magic.
I'll do you one better. You don't call Mike, you call Bobby Turner. My guy Big O's father-in-law, right? He's not doing anything right now. He retired. Yeah. I'm talking to Big O. He's like, yeah, he retired. He's trying to do the family thing. I'm sure it's driving him nuts because, this is a man that has just found running backs, and Mike Shanahan has really leaned on him. Again, this is a guy that was with the Niners last year coaching. Elijah Mitchell, I got to see him at the Senior Bowl a couple years ago too. It seems like Kyle's always finding those running backs, right? Kyle, Mike, whoever. It must be nice.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember back in the day, I think when the 49ers drafted Kevin Barlow, Shanahan called up the head coach at the time and said, "You got the best running back in the draft."
Wow.
And he ended up being pretty good. But he knows his running backs. But yeah, I think he was targeting Kevin Barlow and missed him. D-Generation X coming back in with a super. Thank you so much. He says a chain out of Texas A&M home run hitter. You give him a gap, he's taken to the house. Yeah, and that's the thing too. If you put the money into the offensive line, you can get away with lesser running backs, in my opinion, right? You can make it work with somebody if you have an offensive line that can open the holes. As long as the running back has a decent amount of vision and isn't a turtle back there, he can hit the holes, right? So you can get away with it. I mean, look at what they did with Philip Lindsay. Got a good, got 2 1,000-yard seasons. He struggled since then. There's other running backs that can churn out the yards to keep the defense honest, but you don't need a running back to get 1,800 yards.
No, and I'm glad you brought up Philip Lindsay because, I mean, if you thought Philip Lindsay was small, this guy's small too, 5'9", 180-ish pounds or so on a good day. I think he's listed at 185, but he's a little fella. Definitely interesting. I wouldn't use a draft pick on him. But although I will say this, you see other running backs, maybe not as small, have similar roles. I think Jerick McKinnon is going to be a free agent. Always loved him. Always loved Jerick McKinnon. And you see what a big piece of that Chiefs offense he was. And now they've got to move forward with Isaiah Pacheco, right? Committed to him in the draft. All signs were pointing that way anyways. I think Andy Reid really kind of wanted to put him in his place when he needed to for fumbling the ball. And we all loved Isaiah Pacheco coming out of the draft, right?
Yeah.
Could have had him and Tariq Woolen, but hey, Montreal Washington, So John, I hear you, man. We're all looking for that next back because that back has got to be a hitter. You talk about home run hitter and taking it to the house. We need to see more of that. The last thing I want the Denver Broncos to do is spend big money on a running back. You mentioned it. They're on their second contract. They're on their last legs, so to speak. Yeah. Leonard Fournette is going to be a free agent. Hell, I would rather bring back Latavius Murray, who we know Sean Payton absolutely loves. Maybe there's a possibility there. He's one of those 17 unrestricted free agents that the Broncos may or may not reach out to and try to get him back.
Well, they have to do something. They have to do something at the running back position because I've said it before, Javonte Williams' injury was such that there's no guarantee that he's going to recover from it fully. It wasn't just an ACL tear. They've been fixing ACL tears for a while. People have come back from that. Javonte Williams tore much more than that. It is likely that he's not going to be the same runner as he was. Unfortunately, I love Javonte Williams, man. I love watching him run. I loved his angry runs, and I loved seeing Quinn Miners coming in behind and, giving that extra boost to get him a little bit more yards. But that's the problem. He's not guaranteed to be the player he was when he got injured, especially this year. And then you don't have anybody else. There's nobody. It's a bunch of, a high-priced running back in Edmonds and some undrafted players. Everybody else is unrestricted. So you've got to bring somebody in from free agency. You have to at running back. But it doesn't have to be the big name, the big contract, because you've got other places that you need to spend that money on.
And you're still burned by Melvin Gordon, the last running back to come in with big money,
Yeah,
right? And
right.
look at that. What did he get you? And Super Bowl champ. Can't believe I'm saying that. Melvin Gordon with the Kansas
God.
City Chiefs
Ugh.
on that practice squad. And
Yeah,
the guy's an idiot, folks. Just go to Twitter and you'll be able to see that.
yeah.
Soren Lundgren coming in, 499 super. Huge fan of the show. Do y'all think it's possible to sign Rodney Hudson, George Fant, or Matt Pryor, all unrestricted free agents?
It's funny because I've been talking about Rodney Hudson. He's another one of those, like I said, Roger Saffold. He's kind of struggled. He was a good player, he wasn't an elite player, back in the day, but he was very good. Pro Bowls, definitely a better center. And he's had some injuries. He's getting into that age where, someone can grab him for a 1-year deal. I think the Broncos could solidify that center position for this season while they try and backfill it with a draft pick or some other development prospect. I think you take a chance on a Rodney Hudson. I do. You take a chance on him if you can spend the money on right tackle and you can fill in someone at right guard that's adequate. You take a chance on someone like Rodney Hudson. Give him a 1-year contract. See if he can rekindle that old talent that he had and stay healthy for the year. It's a risk, but it's a calculated one because at 34 years old, all these offensive linemen that were good in the past tend to be good all of a sudden. It's an interesting thing. You can go look at it. I have the graph. I have a write up on it on Mile High Huddle. It's been a few weeks, but go check it out. It's an interesting thing, but I'd take a chance on Hudson for sure.
Yeah, George Fant's interesting to me, right? Former basketball player in his younger days. He was an undrafted cat too. I think 2018 or 2019. I like his athleticism, but again, it's not about athleticism. It's, are you a decent enough football player? Trying to identify the Sean Payton scheme on the offensive line. I'm not going to lie, Tom, it's been difficult for me. There are certain aspects of the power. There are certain aspects of the gap. They're not really West Coast, right? I guess a few shades of it here and there, depending on who his quarterback was. But it's really, really tough for me to nail down Sean Payton's offensive line scheme, probably because Mark Schlereth is the one that created it. Stink has been out there with New Orleans working as a consultant the past few years. We got to watch training camp with Stink last year for a few days, and it's enlightening. Anytime you listen to him talk about not only football, but specifically offensive line and things that he's hearing and what he likes. And again, one of the things that made me just gravitate towards Sean Payton was something Stink was talking about on his own radio show, saying, look, the very first day he was down there in New Orleans, Big Easy, right? Training camp and everything else. Sean Payton told him on the field, you see something wrong, stop the drill right then and there. I want it to be corrected in real time. And Stink's like, you've got offensive line coaches, you've got assistant coaches, you've got veteran players. Are you sure you want me to stop the drill? And he said, yes, it's 100% important that we all get on the same page so we're not wasting our time. I love that from a guy who's so damn arrogant, from a guy who doesn't have any humility, right? That's all we hear about Sean Payton, Hollywood Payton, and all these sorts of things. Well, he seems to know what he's talking about when reaching out to other sources, when reaching out to other resources, trying to get things together. And I love it. Try to fix something in real time. Now, you don't want to waste your time, and there are all these different rules with how long you can practice and things of that nature. But Mark Schlereth, Sean Payton, I know they're not connected with the Broncos this year, but I would be shocked if Stink wasn't somehow involved with the offensive line in the future.
Well, yeah, I'm a 3-time Super Bowl champ, and one of the most iconic lines, or two of the most iconic lines in history. I think you would want to take his advice for sure. I mean, he was one of the Hogs in Washington, and then the Orange Hush in Denver. I mean, come on, man. He's a talented and good guy. Seems like a good guy. We're willing to talk to people and stuff. So I don't have to get Garth Knight here coming in with a super chat, making fun of me kind of about my pronunciation of Reisner. I appreciate that, man. I tell you, it's fun. It must be old age, but I end up doing these. I end up saying things wrong and forget to, who I'm trying to talk about. But man, thank you for the support. I appreciate it.
It's not old age. I hear guys my age do it all the time, especially on Denver radio. And I can't wait to make fun of them because we're usually friends in those circumstances. But I'll test you real quick. Say the starting right guard's name.
Quinn Miners.
Boom. There we go. See, if you can pronounce Quinn Miners, Dalton Risner, you're good, right? Tomato, Garth Knight. Thank you, man. Always a really good friend of the show. Always support us. And Will's liking that too, saying laugh out loud to Garth. Yeah, man. If we can't laugh at ourselves, then
right.
I don't want to do this show anymore. I do enough laughing at myself as well. Look at Trayvon coming in. Mile high or nothing. Absolutely love it, man. We've got so much support here on the channel. Absolutely everywhere. It's really, really humbling and it's exciting, Broncos country. The Broncos are in Indianapolis right now. George Paton, Sean Payton, and the gang looking at potential NFL draft prospects for this spring. They're also talking contract extensions. Draymond Jones, is there an offer on the table? We don't know. We think there might have been, and that's why Draymond wants to ultimately test free agency. Dalton Risner, George Paton ignored him basically yesterday, shouted out everybody but Dalton Risner, unrestricted free agent left guard, 4-year starter for the Denver Broncos. You can read my article about Dalton Risner at milehighhuddle.com. Yeah, the offensive line, it's got to be fixed, and it's going to take time. Folks, it's going to take time. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's got to be a combination of the draft and free agency. I know that is continually being spewed into your ears, just like George Paton said it yesterday, but you are not going to get a free agent offensive lineman to just come in here and be a world beater with a bunch of rookies. And you could potentially be looking at that if you're talking about 4 to different 5 starters on that offensive line. As much as I love Cody Mock out of North Dakota State, he's going to have a learning curve coming into the NFL. We saw that with Quinn Miners, right? A guy who taught himself the center position and then is trying to learn the right guard, doing a decent enough job. Now that Butch Berry's gone, I think the O-line will improve.
Yeah. And Peter Milton's coming in. Thank you. Some Mile High Insiders. I've been missed being on here. Well, we've missed you too, Peter. Thanks for coming in with the from Facebook. And I'll just say, I'm just going to piggyback on that, what you just said. That's why I keep talking about these kind of 1 year older players that you hope can come in and kind of solidify the line, like a Rodney Hudson or a Roger Saffold, while you're trying to also bring in young players. But you have to spend somewhere. So you spend on the right tackle, then you can kind of maybe skimp on the guard or the offense or the center. But you may end up, I don't know, Peyton may end up seeing something in Cushenberry. Don't get me wrong. Like, he was kind of a misfit in that offensive line scheme last year with a coach that wasn't very good on his second year. Maybe Peyton says, you know what, we can actually coach, because I liked Cushenberry coming out of college. I thought he was going to be a steal in the 3rd round, and he wasn't. But maybe Peyton's got some better plans for him. So maybe you see they spend at right tackle and guard and just then roll with it and see what happens.
Sometimes it does happen. Sometimes you get a guy like Creed Humphrey, right? And just an absolute world beater in there.
Another one I liked.
I know, right? If only the Broncos picks up all the guys we told them, they'd be undefeated every year, right? It's one of those things.
I miss a few, definitely.
What's your worst miss? I'll put Drew Lock up there for me, right? Because I was a guy, right? The same guy who was leading the hate parade. I was a guy saying get him in the 1st, and thank God the Broncos didn't do that. So he's up there for me. I liked Trevor a lot too, Trevor Siemian. Those are 2 of my really, really bad hits, or not hits, misses. And I think it's interesting because nobody wants to talk about who they've missed on in the scouting world. It's this shunned thing, this elephant in the room that everybody pretends to look the other way. And it should be funny at the end of the day, right? I get it's jobs and
everybody.
There's a lot on the line, but it was hilarious. Drew Lock in the 1st round. That's funny.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one that I missed on, and it made me remember what I should have been looking at to begin with. A guy named Yowan Smallwood out of Connecticut was super athletic. I watched a lot of his tape, and I was like, he just doesn't have instincts, but I think he can, if he watches tape and gets better coaching, I think he'll be better. And he ended up he bombed it at the combine, bombed it at his pro day, ended up, I think, getting taken in the 7th round. And he was, like, for me, I was like, man, you could take him in the 2nd or 3rd and be fine. But I missed that big time. But I learned.
What position was he?
He was an inside linebacker.
Okay.
And I learned, I was like, if the guy doesn't have the instincts in college, he's probably not going to have them in the pros. Steer clear. For me, that's the inside linebacker is the biggest thing. You got to have the instincts. You can have the athleticism, but And so I made a big mistake in saying, oh, I think he could probably learn it, and he couldn't.
You're getting me all excited when you're talking about inside linebacker because, as Nick Kendall would tell you and Scott too, I love every linebacker I see. It's one of my favorite positions of all time, man. And especially being here so close to the University of Wyoming, right? I've got no connections with Wyoming other than going to their pro day every year. Seeing guys like Logan Wilson and Chad Muma just be ignored by Denver drive me absolutely crazy because CU is going to be a factory here in a couple of years, and all the scouts are being going to Folsom and Boulder trying to get a look at Prime's guys. But Wyoming has quietly been putting guys out. Andrew Wingard with the Jags, safety as well. You've got multiple receivers in the league. I mean, these are guys in the Broncos' backyard that they're just not identifying. D-Generation X, John coming in again. Thanks, man. $10 super. You guys keep telling everybody that Javonte Williams may not be the same, but you should just look at DK Dobbins, running back for Baltimore, still not the same 3 years later with that same lower leg injury.
Yeah, I know. I've been talking about it. It is a bummer. Like inside linebackers, I love them. I love powerful running backs like Javonte Williams, man. And I said it like the first game. I said this guy's going to be a fan favorite. You watch, and he was. He was so fun to watch. Everybody loved watching him, making it angry runs. And man, I hope he comes back. I hope he is able to recover fully, because that career right there would be a fun one to watch for the next 5 years.
I agree. And when I knew Javonte Williams was going to be good, I wanted him to. And when they traded up to go get him, I couldn't believe it. And by the way, we're talking about Bobby Turner. That was Bobby Turner's favorite running back in that draft. And Bobby actually called some of his former Broncos guys saying, you guys he did the Mike Shanahan thing. You guys got the best back in the draft. Not that I'm pissed off about it or anything, but yeah, Javonte, I knew he was going to be good. That very first press conference phone call that I had with him, where he's being introduced to the team, and he was horrible at the microphone. And I absolutely loved it, because what running back do you know that doesn't want to talk into the microphone, that wants to run people over? We're talking about linebackers. He was a former linebacker, folks. 4.0 valedictorian of his high school, also linebacker / running back. Will he be the same? That remains to be seen. And guys, we're just up the 1 hour mark right now, so we're gonna make sure we're answering everybody's questions on the way out real quick. Phil McLaughlin, I haven't heard much news on picking up a kicker. Phil, I hear you. Brandon McManus, that last remnant of Super Bowl 50.
Yeah, I just looked at that. Thanks, Phil, for the Facebook stars. Appreciate that. Bringing up the kicker. I wrote it down on my piece of paper here earlier today, and I said if they cut McManus, I think they save around $2 million on the cap. Not a huge savings, but if you want to purge all that old, if you're Sean Payton, you're like, okay, we're purging a lot of this old stuff. Maybe he is one that gets purged. I like Brandon McManus as a kicker, but he hasn't been very good lately. So
Brandon McManus is a pain in the ass. All right. He's a pain in the ass. We're out there at training camp, and we're out there with a few different guys. And one of the guys is tweeting, how many misses versus makes he's had. And every year McManus has got to respond and clap back. I'm over it, man. I suppose he's done a lot of good work in Denver. And I respect that and appreciate that. And thank you, Brandon. But I'm ready for a new one. I think I found one too. For the first time ever, I'm looking at kickers. I can't believe it. That's how bad I want Brandon McManus off this team. Noah Ruggles, some kid out of Ohio State, makes damn near every kick ever. Ohio State player. Maybe he was friends with Draymond from years ago when he was in high school. I don't know. Anything to get Draymond in the building, that Ohio State love, I'm here for it, unless it's an Ohio State quarterback. Guys, we're going to get out of here. Again, the franchise tag deadline hits Tuesday, March 7th. NFL free agency begins Wednesday, March 15th. Get at Thomas Hall on Twitter, at Thomas Hall NFL. Yours truly, at Luke Patterson LP. If you'd like to reach out to Scott, that's at Scout Kennedy. Head on over to the mothership, at Mile High Huddle on Twitter, milehighhuddle.com. Be sure to give my Dalton Reisner piece a quick read and say your goodbyes, because I don't think number 66 is going to be around much longer. And away we go. Tomorrow you will have the boys back, Chad and Zach, on Huddle Up, and we will keep rocking and rolling here on MHH.
Thank you. Thanks for the support.
Of course. A great show, Broncos country. Hang in there with us. The combine, the action starts tomorrow. Do not miss Chad, Zach, and the Huddle Up. For Tom and Scott, this is Luke saying always believe in that mile high magic.